about this morning, that's not right. What are, rights for young people when they are moving into adulthood. And it's something that no one hands you a script for. It's something that you have to go searching for, and what they should do is they should give you a big spade. Yeah, a spade would be really helpful. Can I have the second slide up, please? Okay, no, we're not seeing it, okay. So, yeah, go digging because there is no script. Google is somewhere that's really handy, but then you could spend all your time on Google. So you then have to start thinking, okay, where else do I go? Because no one jumps forward and gives you or your young person all the information that you need. So as a parent carer, you rely on other parent carers. You rely on charities, third sector organisations. Seek out what you can and dig as deep as you can, because getting the tools that you need, really most of them, you have to find them yourself, and you have to add them into your treasure chest, because you build a treasure chest as you go along. Can I have the next slide, please? So one of the best pieces of treasure I found, not just for Ryan, but for myself as well, was guardianship, because lots of people want to control what's happening, but that's okay when they're in school. But as they move out of school, everything falls to the parent carer. And not just myself, a lot of other parent carers I've heard say it was like going back to nursery days, because you all of a sudden have all these responsibilities that other people have taken over, education and things, when they're in school, and all of a sudden it's back to you. So without the guardianship, on our personal experience, I wouldn't have had a seat at the table to advocate for Ryan when he needed me to, and to support him, because the guardianship's not about taking away a young person's rights. It's actually about giving them rights and giving them support and advocating when you need to, but you're allowed to help them make informed choices by finding the information out for your young person and letting them decide, letting them make choices, but also ensuring, that they do have a voice. Can I have the next slide, please? So, getting it right. When Ryan left education, he went, school, he went on to college for further education. But that first year really was decided not by myself, it was mainly directed by school, but then school have nothing. Once he leaves, that's it, it's down to you and it's down to Ryan. So being able to support Ryan, we didn't in the first year really have a voice, and we had to try and bring down barriers. And Ryan was in college for 5 years in total, and I would say it took until that 5th year, year upon year, having to help Ryan with his mental health, and having to support him and go in and have the seat at the table. Can't take all the credit. My partner Francis, was very much around that table too. But with the guardianship, we had a seat at the table when Ryan needed us to advocate for him, to sometimes just be there so that it would help him to have more confidence to say what he wanted to say, because it was a problem saying it without being at the table. But it was bringing the other people in. And I would say four very, very difficult years for Ryan were spent at college, and it was a constant battle. It's a battle. It's a battle for Ryan, but it also affects our relationships together because we're having to fight it. But in year 5, we finally found the Learning Support Department, Learning Support Manager and the Learning Support Coordinator finally got on board when we went in with Ryan with his version of this is what it should look like, because he was doing an article for part of his course for media and communications, which is, if you want to come to the college as an autistic person, I've done all this research and this is what it's like. And then Brian put together and we presented the reality of what it felt like to feel excluded, not included, what it felt like not to be heard, not to be given the same rights as your peers. And I have to say, they really got on board. And we went from 4 years of battling to a year of meetings, reviews, listening to Ryan, looking at what's working well, and then how can we change that even better? How can we help to get that in place? And it was collaborative working that got Ryan success that year, working between sending weekly emails out saying, you're going to have support or you're not, we're struggling. And it's okay. Yeah, we know that sometimes they struggle to get enough support workers, but the difference was Ryan knowing that that was going to be a problem that day and preparing for it, rather than going in and being asked to sit an assessment with no support and having to come out and phone me, you know, basically having a panic attack saying, I can't do this. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge when there is good practice, but it shouldn't have taken 5 years to get to that. And also to the point where Ryan eventually said, I can't do education anymore. Yeah, it was phenomenal that he completed the course. We knew he would, especially when COVID hit towards the end and he had to change his plans quite a bit. But let's try and work together. We need to listen to our young people, and we all need to work round that table collaboratively to get things working from the start, before they leave the school, not even in year one, but before they leave school. Let them feel confident that the journey ahead isn't going to be breaking down barriers, but actually building up relationships. Thank you.
I mean, very, very well said, Julie. And, you know, that's the thing, you know, knowing when you're not going to have support is half the battle when it comes to a good transition process. And it doesn't matter if it's like, you know, if it's like, say, you know, 6 months before you're leaving school, or if it's like maybe 2 full years before you're leaving school, even if you're going into, I don't know, maybe college into university, the more information you know going through that transition process, the better journey you're possibly going to have. I mean, it's not going to be plain sailing by any means. I won't deny that even in my 5th year of college, when we had a lot more support in place, there were still ups and downs here and there. But at the end of the day, better than having some, you know, things not in place is better than, you know, having not everything in place. All right, Megan.
Is there a button there, push? Oh.
Yeah, you just hold it.
Okay, sorry, slight technical issue. Hi, my name is Megan. I'm a policy officer with the Children and Young People's Commission of Scotland, and the Commissioner's role is to protect and safeguard, promote and safeguard the rights of children and young people in Scotland up to the age of 18 or 21 if they're care experienced. I'm quite thankful for Julie for saying I'm also a person. I'm also a person. It's one of these incidents when I'm coincidentally also disabled, but I also have parent of an autistic child who has last year in the middle of COVID transitioned from secondary school to college quite unexpectedly from our point of view. One of the interesting things I found at the beginning of Julie's discussion was talking about needing to get a guardianship order. I'm actually disappointed that you needed to get one, because actually I think it's an example of something that we do see from time to time, which is that children, young people's and disabled people's right to participate in their decision making about them should be a right that empowers them. But we do sometimes see it used in a way that excludes the people who support them. So what should have happened was a conversation with Ryan to say, are you okay for mum to be the person who speaks to us about this for you? It shouldn't have required the hoops that you had to go through. but it's something that definitely happens. Both the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is the main convention our office was set up to look at, but also the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. I often get the name of the convention wrong because it's the opposite way from how we speak in Scotland. But both of those conventions have really important things to say about the support that disabled children and young people should get. And the rights that they're entitled to. And that includes rights in education, and it also includes the ability to participate in that decision making and get support to do it. And that support can come, or should come, both from the government, from the state, so from the public authorities, the education service or the college or the university, but also they should respect children's right to choose someone to advocate on their behalf, whether that be a parent or someone else. And that's something that we see as a real gap sometimes, and sadly also used sometimes to exclude people who are supporting children and young people. In terms of transitions more broadly, there's definitely a gap around planning transitions, and it's a gap that seems to exist across the spectrum of disability. It's not specific to types of disability, it's not specific to how that disability affects different children. You'll have children who transition from 6th year to university face the same challenges with getting the right support in place to do it as children who have very complex disabilities and are transferring from childhood health services into adult health services, or from childhood education, and everything in between. That seems like there is a cliff edge, and there's also multiple systems that aren't talking to each other. The children's services don't necessarily communicate with the adults, or when they do, they're talking different languages. And the Deputy Director from Scottish Government, which spoke earlier, talked about ASN, and anyone who's interacted with education will talk about ASN lots. Lots of people outside education have no idea what it means. And in the context we're talking about today, it means disabled. And disabled people have rights in law. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I'm quite passionate about making sure we say this is about disability. Disabled people have rights in law in the Equality Act. They have rights in human rights law in the UNCRC, and Parliament voted unanimously last year to incorporate the UNCRC into Scots law. There's been a quite slight technical hiccup with that happening, but we're hoping Scottish Government are going to treat this with the urgency it needs and fix the bill very soon, and it'll be law hopefully before the year's out. They've also committed to incorporate the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities into Scots law, which will extend the protections for disabled children and young people, because all of those rights belong to children as well, but also for those who are over the age of 18, which is the cutoff for the Children's Convention. So that's two really important things, which hopefully will give us tools we can use to improve transition services.
Very well said, because like you said yourself, there's that cliff edge. An analogy that I always like to use when it comes to the transition process, when there's that lack of clear communication and support, it's like a Jenga tower where you got all these parts and pieces in place, but the moment you start taking away certain parts of said support, things will just, slowly become more unstable and eventually spiral out of control. Without further ado, then let's move on to our chap, Luke Murphy. Floor is yours, buddy.
Sorry, I'm not very good at microphones. I'm going to apologize at the start. So what you see in front of me is called an eye gaze device. It's got my notes on it, so it might look like I'm concentrating on the screen, but it's actually how I move and read and things. So yeah, I'd been obviously researching the rights as obviously a disabled person myself. I'm 27 now though, but I'm also a sibling of someone with autism and additional needs who recently transitioned from school to college. So have recently been through, my mum went through the guardian process with my little brother, and as a family, we obviously have to give permission and things for that. So have a lot of experience in multiple sectors of being disabled myself, and it would have been seen as being a young carer, but I just saw it as helping with my little brother growing up. So yeah, with coming to rights and stuff, obviously it's been spoken a lot about the transitions from school and education, but people forget that there's other transitions you go through as somebody with a disability. A big one for me was moving out. I moved out at 19, almost 20, as a person with a disability that was invisible at the time, and had to go through that process of, just at the time, it was only equipment, like basic equipment, like something for the bath and something for the kitchen. And then eventually having to advocate for myself with social work, and having to push for the support I needed as a disabled person to live an independent life. Because what a lot of people forget, and professionals forget this, is that independence isn't doing everything yourself. Independence is having somebody there to support you to be as independent as possible in your life. Obviously, advocating, you can come from yourself, it can come from family members, be it parents, guardians, other members of your family, or sometimes you need to get professional advocates involved. And that is a process I had to go through with Shelter Scotland to try and get me suitable housing in the end, which sadly didn't turn out to be suitable. And it's where I've ended up now in a private let, having to pay more than the standard would have to pay just to have a way of living that allows me to live to the point that I can have the life that I want, be it volunteering, seeing friends, maybe returning to education. Obviously, with all of this, a holistic approach is very important. I am physically disabled, I have mental health problems, but I'm also a transgender adult now. I transitioned at 16, socially, transitioned at 18 medically. So for me, that meant I started hormone replacement therapy. But due to my genetic condition, I can't have surgery. This is where some of the rights around your own space, privacy, dignity are very important to me. I need help with all my personal care. And as somebody who presents as male, but anatomically is female, I don't want multiple different carers in and out my house having to provide this very intimate care in my life. And when I started with social work, I was only receiving home care. And as many people will know, when you get home care or through through an agency, you will have 30 different carers in 6 months. And that was the experience I had for the pandemic. And I fought for, I think it was 6 years total, to get a social work budget put in place. And that was a battle with advocates from my family, from myself, from professionals, from all sources to get me this support. And the what is so complicated with this is when you're particularly someone with physical and mental health issues, whose budgets are going to come out of. Social work say it's a mental health problem, they pay for it. Mental health teams say, well, no, it's obvious this is physical. And sadly, this ended with social work deciding that I had what is now called fictitious disorder, used to be known as Munchausen's, which I do not have. I have a rare genetic condition that has been diagnosed by genetics. But this battle led me to the point where I now have a misdiagnosis of borderline personality disorder on file, which makes access in healthcare very difficult. It's a battle I'm pretty open about, because it's something that needs spoken about how the right support needs to be there to allow you to reach your potential. And because obviously with education and stuff isn't for everyone. For me, it's doing some voluntary work, would be things like this. And it's accessing my community, my chosen community. So I do a lot with Glasgow Disability Alliance, particularly around their Drivers for Change, which is a lot of campaign work. I also am quite passionate about campaigning for Changing Places toilets, something that I need and that there's very little of. And what campaign work is about, people focus a lot on access to a hoist and a changing table, but forget that people still need to access a toilet as well. Not everyone is just to get changed at the end of the day. And also for me, accessing the queer community is very important. As a trans person, a queer person, I want to be able to access that. It's a big part of my life, has been for a long time. But I need somebody to help me with that, but also somebody who understands these issues. I attend an LGBTQ group for disabled people specifically, and obviously not everyone in the group is out, so who's supporting me needs to understand that privacy around that. Not everyone is going to be sharing things that they're sharing within this group. Not everyone is as open as I am about it. So yeah, it's coming back to, again, the holistic approach, the person-led approach, and money is always a barrier, as everyone will know. Money for equipment, money for wheelchairs, money for adaptations to your home, money for your support. Often it falls to other organizations to fund this. I currently have to apply for funding for a new wheelchair because Westmark in the west of Scotland can't fund me a wheelchair that meets my needs. This fantastic piece of equipment in front of me was funded by ILF Scotland, which thankfully arrived 3 days before we went into lockdown. Without that, I wouldn't have been able to access Divergent Influencers, GDA courses, anything online because my laptop wasn't accessible to me. And that shouldn't be the case. Equipment, technology, all these things should be more easily funded for people to access things, particularly in the current times. So yeah, I'll give it back to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Luke. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Thank you all so much for sharing. It's, you know, they're very personal stories, and it's a privilege to be able to hear them. I was reflecting just on what you said, Luke, about accessing kind of queer spaces and stuff, and from kind of conversations that I've heard around transitioning and stuff, it's a lot about getting access to education, colleges, work and that kind of thing. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit about the support for social, kind of the social side of those things. Outing myself as a bit of a nerd, but I was president of my politics society at uni, and that was a really important part of my education. And I just wonder if there is support for that side of things when leaving school as well, because that's just as important as the more formal kind of side of leaving school. Thank you.
Well, before I pass you on to the panelists and they can answer it, that's actually a good point you have raised there, because transition is more than just, you know, it's more than just one piece of a puzzle. It's one piece. Socializing is just one piece of the great transition puzzle. So I'll let Luke answer this.
Well, obviously I have a budget which is funded. How things work currently is you can, as a disabled person, you will receive all your personal care for free. But when it comes to your social support, you need to be a contribution towards that. How it works is they will take, as a standard, they will take all of your care component of PIP. That is standard. And then you have to fight for disability related expenses, as it's called, which can be difficult. They don't take a lot into consideration. So they don't take into consideration more electricity for doing more washes, because some people need to wash more things. Other expenses, like some people need more clothing, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, when it comes to social support, it's very difficult to get. My brother, all his support is for social reasons, to get out of the house, to go to college for life skills. And I know my mum had a huge fight with social work on her hands because they kept saying, you managed till now. Well, she's like, but he's 18, he's an adult. He does not want his mum following him about everywhere. We need him to have a life, to have his own choices, as well as the fact that my mum bought her own home. She's remarried now. My parents, as I spoke about earlier, co-parent still. We still spend Christmas together. We see mum, we see dad. They get on as friends. Mum's remarried. My dad has a new partner. Has been for many years. And mum and my stepdad work. They have to pay a mortgage. So how are they meant to support socially? And it's not fair to have them sat in the house with my stepsister all day. So yeah, it's very difficult to receive that social support, and you will have to sadly fight for it and push and try and make sure that they're not neglecting that side, because that side is just as important as the sort of physical need or the emotional need as well.
Well said, Luke, well said. I believe Megan Farr would like to speak on the matter as well.
Thanks. From a rights perspective, this is a really interesting one, because I think quite often certain rights get privileged over others. So education is really important. So the support's put in place for that, but it doesn't look at the child's whole life. And both the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and the rights of people with disabilities, both of them recognise that disabled children, children generally, but disabled people and children all have the right to enjoy the full range of their community life, to be part of their community, to take place in social activities, to do recreational activities, to do sport if they wish, to meet with other people of their choosing, to go out with friends, and that the state has an obligation to the best of its ability to support them and do that. And the best of its ability is in the context of, we are a wealthy nation, we are the 5th biggest economy in the world. So the caveat that's put in there about to the best of a state's ability is not about rich countries like us. The state should be doing much more, and the priorities should be on not just the essentials of daily life as people see it, which is often just for children getting to and from school. It's about the things that happen around the school. It's about going to, when they get older, to social activities without having to take mum along, because obviously that's not mum's job. It's not our job as a parent to take your child to a social event when they're 18. They should be doing that independently. And that means if they want mum to help them, fine, but actually that adults and older children and young people also have a right to do things without their mums, because that's what all children do as they get older. And it is often a reliance on women. I'll sort of, from a feminist perspective, the state relies on unpaid women to do this and compensates them badly through carers allowance and things like that. And behind that is someone who's not getting the support that they're entitled to. That means that they can have a relationship with their family. If they choose to not have their family be their carer, they can have a relationship that doesn't have that as part of it. But also, if they do choose to have a family member as a carer, we should be paying them properly. They should be properly paid as if the state was paying someone else to do it, rather than the levels of carers allowance. So when I talk about the right to have that support provided to you, and support of your choosing provider, so someone you choose to support you to do these things, it's not against parents as carers. It's actually saying we should recognize how much parents do, and take the weight off them where that's appropriate, and compensate them properly where the choices that they're going to do that work, because it's work.
Very wise words, Megan. I believe, Julie, you have something to say as well.
Yeah, to follow on from what Luke and Megan were saying, one of the really important parts of transitioning for young people for Ryan was in school. He was very active in PE, and he attended a couple of disability sports clubs. And that for Ryan was, and still is, being active as a medicine. It's really vital in his life. It helps him to cope with anxiety and stress that he faces day in, day out. And on transitioning from school into adult life, did he want his mum to continue to take him and sit there, or did he want to have that independence, and an independence that had already been robbed because he had transport going to school, and all of a sudden when he moved into college, he lost that independence because no one told him. And that transport, he discovered a week before, as did I, a week before starting college, that, well, you're actually going back the way you're going back to nursery days, because it's back to taxi of mum. But I was also losing independence. And I think that's really, really important. And there's another thing I wanted to touch on, what you were saying, Megan. So not having the guardianship, and there are so many parent carers out there whose children are disabled. They may not have that formal diagnosis, but they are. And they've gone on to forward destinations and further education, and it's collapsed around them, and the parents not being aware of it until they're at crisis point, and their young person's not been attending college, for example, for months. But if they were allowed to be, and as they should be, as the rights for that young person, and as a parent carer to support them and advocate, if they could do that without the need, because they may not need the guardianship for other areas, and it may be felt that, well, I can step in and support and advocate, but that needs everybody working collaboratively before they leave school.
Can I come in briefly on that again?
Of course you can.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. I think part of the thing is that the legal system of guardianship is a bit of a blunt tool. It's about this person doesn't have the capacity to do this, rather than this person needs more support to do this. And where things like that go wrong, I think it's often, and I've had personal experience of supporting a young person who isn't related to me, but I know who's been in exactly this position this year, is that it's actually that the planning hasn't happened, that says, okay, this is this child, or this is this young person, this is their needs, this is the things that might happen, and that with the child's permission, where children are, and most children are capable of being part of that conversation, particularly if they're going to somewhere like college or university, and having a conversation where there's an existing arrangement with the child's permission and with their involvement in the planning, that if things start to go wrong, we'll contact mum. Rather than what happens is things start to go wrong and then they feel they can't contact mum because there is no hard rule that says we can't have a plan in place that says if we think you're unwell, particularly mental health conditions, these are the people you can contact. And in the case I was involved in, that worked. That was put in place. That particular college was very good at it. It was all part of the planning at the beginning. The young person was involved in agreeing it. And when things did go wrong, when they started missing classes and things like that, that connection was already there between parents and the young person and the college, and that happened. And it goes back to what I was saying about sometimes that rather than the child's right to make independent decisions and be involved in those decisions, even if they're not able to make them themselves, is used as a way to exclude parents and carers and other people who support children and young people, rather than as a way to empower children and young people. Because, yeah, so I mean, it's enormously concerning, and we've seen it happen even, we did a report about probably 15 or more years ago now. It's the very early days of our office, of a young person who was going to university, who had fairly significant physical care needs. They were a wheelchair user, they needed help with personal care, and they needed to use hoists and things like that. And the placement fell down simply because the social care support wasn't put in place, because there was no planning. But we're still seeing that today with young people arriving in college with no advanced planning. The planning all has to happen whilst college is starting. And too many young people, we're still hearing about them effectively crashing out of a college course through lack of support. And that does huge damage to that young person's confidence, to their mental health, to the family's mental health. And it for some young people puts them off education forever. And it's about the fact that the planning isn't happening until things start to go wrong, and it should be happening from the start.
That's a good point you raised there, Megan, because I think, what can happen sometimes is when there's that lack of planning and support in place, the long-term psychological impact of that is that then the person goes through episodes of life where they don't have the motivation to do anything. And, it's different for everyone, because you got those who will just give up completely, and then you'll get those who, will just keep going even though they feel that there's not much point to what they're doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happens to too many disabled young people, and the problem's not them, the problem's the system.
Any more questions? Yes.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan's stepdad, so I can read the City of Glasgow story, and it is about planning, because Ryan's assessment, when we had the guardianship, it opened the door for us. We're at the table. I asked 4 people employed to support Ryan, have you read his assessment? They all said no, and I asked, why not? And that was a trigger to help Ryan move forward. So for any problem, you need data and information, and the data that was there, the information was there, it was ignored. And that was I think a light bulb for the lecturers and the support staff within the college, actually, to, oh, there is information here, we need to use it. And that for me was the big step forward for Ryan.
It's true, for instance, because it stems back to that article I wrote, where I wrote, what I liked about the college, at least from an autistic point of view. And then, when I compare that to the reality that I actually had to experience, stark contrast. I believe we also had a question on this side, wasn't it? Okay.
While the microwave's moving, I say, and actually, in some ways, colleges, just because we've been talking about colleges and failure plan and things like that. Failure plan isn't just colleges; it's also schools, it's also universities, and it's the playlist short to each other. But actually, college can so often be a fantastic place for autistic young people, and lots of them have really positive experiences compared to school.
Exactly. So
Hello, my name's Patricia Hewitt. I have two young men on the autistic spectrum. One's 24, one's 25. We haven't had any transitions whatsoever. The youngest one was written off as lazy and winging it, never referred. And the middle one, it was down to behavioural problems. We've gone through hell and back, including police involvement. I wanted to commit suicide. In the end, I just couldn't cope, didn't understand this behaviour. The lack of understanding of autism in Scotland is absolutely disgraceful. My middle son was illegally excluded for 5 months in sixth form. The youngest one was excluded in nursery for 5 months. What's basically happened, my middle son will now spend his life on benefits because early intervention wasn't there. They both have something called the PDA profile of autism, which some of you might have heard about. And the youngest one, who was written off as lazy and winging it due to an inspirational tutor. I hate to say men are good. It's against every principle in my body. And also Leeds, Scotland, who listened to the horror story. He was the first one with a PDA profile at college, so we literally winged it. Going back to student support, the first, I think, 4 years, they were absolutely atrocious. We didn't get a fraction of what we asked for. SAS kept saying, oh, well, this will put him at an advantage to other students, had to fight tooth and nail for everything. And in the end, against all the odds, he's passed a degree, a Bachelor of Music degree in classical music. But as I say, as a family, it's just about destroyed us. We've had, as I say, police involvement, handcuffed, and it just has to change. PDA has to be accepted. I petitioned Scottish ministers twice, and we have to move on from here. And do you know what I mean? Children can't just be abandoned like they're saying, oh, it's not in the diagnostic manual, it doesn't exist. And how all this kicked off in the first place, I was told I needed a diagnosis to get support from S2. I found out the hard way, no, you don't.
Yeah, you definitely do not need a diagnosis to get support in school or college. The Equality Act makes that clear, and the Additional Support for Learning Act makes that clear. That said, diagnoses are helpful because they help understand what the needs of the child are likely to be. It doesn't give you the answers of what they are going to be.
get the online questions, Becky.
Thanks. Yeah, there's some questions coming up in the chat. One for you, Julie. Julie, this is from Lana Armstrong. Was your guardianship order financial and welfare? How long did the process take?
It is both financial and welfare. The initial one took about 6 months, probably a bit more, and the renewal was better, I would say, and I think for me, having the right person support Ryan and myself, we were lucky, and we were recommended, actually through social work, we were recommended as solicitor for the renewal, and it took all the stress away from myself and Ryan. Their expertise and knowledge were first class, and it does make a difference. But initially, it was about 6 months, and I suppose it was quite, as a parent, initially it was quite daunting, because you had to look, rather than as we do, celebrate and enjoy and focus on the positives and where Ryan is making phenomenal strides. It's very much, you have to look at what doesn't work as well initially. So now, a few years down the line, I look at it, and it's something that we couldn't have achieved. Brian could never have achieved what he has, and it would have had an even greater toll on both our mental health. So I think if you're with the right person, it can be quite straightforward.
It's true though, because like, you know, we look back to when I left secondary school, and it's no point denying that it was probably one of the worst periods of my life mentally. You know, I fell down. I was basically the secondary school basically discarded me. I mean, it was the worst part was it was a special needs secondary school. So you'd think there'd be that little bit of extra support going into my first year of college, but nope, not even a weep, not even a peep.
We've got somebody on the call with their hand up. Amy, I think you've a question. Hopefully we'll be able to hear you.
Hi, it's Amy from earlier. So I was just, I'm sorry, I couldn't see the lady and I'm not sure of her name, but she was talking about the PDA profile and about having a diagnosis. And I absolutely agree with her. And although the legislation's there, although the guidance is there, nothing happens until you have a diagnosis. When you have a diagnosis of anything, not just PDA autism, suddenly things change. Suddenly things start happening, and that's not how it should be, but it is how it plays out. And I feel that there are policies that each school will have. They create their own policies, but I think there needs to be more to pull them kind of into some kind of standard, into line. Again, going back to what that lady was saying about understanding behaviour. So, you know, I've been looking at the school policy, I think, for health and well-being, and it goes on to describe it about how the school's supporting it, and there's also bits about bullying, and you know, there's another policy for that. But there's a description of, you know, the well-being indicators, and I think, well, so I should have pointed out, sorry, that my child is at a mainstream school, supported full time in the DAS. But there are some descriptions of behaviours. I think really there are so many kids in that class that they would be completely overlooked because you would assume, or it could be assumed, that some of these behaviours are just expected and normal for them. And I think, so who's looking out for their mental health and their well-being? Who's really noticing a change? Who's noticing that actually this child has been like that since they came into school, day one, and nobody ever thought, you know what, they're bored, they're unhappy. They just thought, oh, well, they were born like that, so we'll just leave it like that. I'm maybe tailing off into a wee bit of a tangent here, but I really feel that school policies, there needs to be more guidance on that to help people understand and support behaviour.
Don't worry, Amy. As someone who's gone off in tangents myself when it comes to presentations, I completely understand what you mean. Megan.
I'm also very good at going off in tangents. Couple of things just picking up from there, and I think the understanding of autism and the complex and varied way that autism presents itself in different people and how different people are affected, I think needs a lot of work still. I think sometimes there's a really narrow view, and sometimes that narrow view can also ignore that the behavior that happens often because children and young people aren't properly supported and aren't coping. And I think we've heard of examples of that today. On the diagnosis front, it's a bit of a two-edged sword. Sometimes it can be really useful as a way of advocating. It shouldn't need to be, but the reality is it is. But I think there's been mention already about borderline personality disorder, and I think there's a real issue with that label and a couple of other labels being applied to people who are ultimately often diagnosed with an autistic spectrum disorder, and I think that can be enormously disempowering. So I think there's a really complicated situation with diagnosis at the moment in how sometimes it can help understand what's happening and what the needs of a child or young person are, but at other times it becomes a barrier. And the other thing that we've been talking about a lot in the last years is that we need to understand that behavior as part of a disability rather than just treating it as bad behavior and excluding disabled children who aren't able to cope in a classroom setting and kick off as a result. because that's discrimination.
Yeah, because you know, it's the end of the day, it's like, you know, I mean, sure, people with additional disabilities can be a little bit this and that, but at the end of the day, you know, sure, we might need to work in our own room when it comes to, I don't know, an exam or assessment, but you know, if we're given the right support, we will be able to do most of our, you know, in-class work. I mean, obviously, I know we're coming up on lunchtime and that, but I believe I had a question for Luke. Actually, I want to ask him myself. You know, what do the rights of young people mean to you on a personal level, Luke? You know, how you think, you know, being involved with divergent influencers helped, you know, shape your outlooks on the rights of young people and so on?
So yeah, I'm very aware of my rights. I'm very good at researching and understanding what I need to know to get the level of support I need, because I've had to fight tooth and nail for it. So being involved with the DIs in particular, I very much enjoy, because I know from experience of things I've been involved in, friends, things with my brother, that not everyone can have their voice heard. And it's really important to, as people who can relate to this, be able to stand up and speak up for not just your own experiences and yourself, but other people who have been through the exact same situation or similar situations, because that level of understanding to each other is very important.
I mean, very well said. Well said, my friend. Well said. Are there any further questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Asma and I have two boys with autism. I'm a mother of Louise, who's already doing one at the conference, and I've got an older son, Bazan. Now, we were talking about the guardianship and all that. I've had a different experience because both of my boys went to a special needs school. And with my older one who sat next to me, I had a bit of a tiff with the school because they wanted him to do entrance to learning. He had autism, but I knew academically he could work doing in college. And they were really against me. They thought I was dictating my son. They weren't happy with my decision. So I had to go behind the school or special needs schools back, take my son personally, make the interview with the college, have the interview taken, and allowed me to go in. I did not have guardianship. The reason I did not get the guardianship because my son was academically clever enough, so I wasn't able to get the guardianship. How could I treat him being not making decisions? Well, he can make decisions in the academic side, but not the social side of things. So I was in a dilemma. So I had to tell my son, you have to give me the permission, for speak on your behalf, because they're not going to listen. Now he's getting confused. He's getting one side of the school saying, no, 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 no. I think your mum's dictating you. Just listen to us. Do the entrance to learning. Learn your social skills. Academics will come later. Well, for me, I thought, why are you putting him back while he's moving forward? And I think he can do it. Just let him give a chance, let me fight for this at least. But they weren't taking it. So I had to keep it very quiet. It was very hard for Fazan to stay quiet. He was like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, thinking, how am I going to school? How am I going to react with the teacher? How am I going to lie? I said, you'll have to learn to lie now. We've got no choice, son, or else we'll get caught like big time. But luckily, Edinburgh College were brilliant. I had a really good lecturer who understood my needs and understood my son's need. They let me sit with him with his interview process. She said, I'll make sure that the lecturers know everything. I will get in contact with you. It's a big step you're taking, and we'll do it. So when the school found out what I was up to, they had no choice because I already had it in black and white, and I had the letter and I said, this is what I'm doing. If you don't like it, it's no. So I did not get the guardianship. I did not get the support from social work, nothing. But from my son who was autistic, needed all the support, social and all that. Now going into college, I lost everything because I was going independent. I was going myself. I was being the main voice for him. I was being the main carer for him. I was like, I know how everyone says he's 18 and what's the mum doing that. I had no choice because there was nobody helping me. I was being the voice for my son. And now being a carer, looking after him all my life sort of thing. I'm not like I'm controlling him. The two brothers, they're driving. They're going to college, it's a university. He's got a job with Edinburgh Council. It's okay, it's a 6-month contract, but it's better than nothing. I got him to where it is because I had faith in him, and because he couldn't speak up for himself, from being a severely autistic child into an adult. He's still autistic, but they said, no, doesn't matter he's autistic, but he can do the academics. So where does he, can he not, why does he need help? So I get into that dilemma all the time. Yes, my son is academically clever, but socially he's still lagged behind, if that makes sense. He can't make that decision. Sorry.
Well, a good point you brought up there. So I'll let Megan actually, if she wants to say something. It's all right.
Yeah, this is a really interesting discussion to be listening to, because I said earlier about guardianship being kind of a blunt instrument. I'm going to go off and read a whole lot more about the use of guardianship now, because it's quite an old-fashioned concept in terms of thinking about disabled people. And my understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, is that it's very much about whether someone is or isn't capable. It doesn't deal with degrees of capacity. But the other thing is, it seems to be being used. This is the second or possibly the third example today where it's being used by public services to exclude someone being advocated on behalf of someone else, in this case, a parent. But a child who's able to do that advocating on anyone who is able to advocate on their own behalf is also entirely entitled to choose someone else to advocate on their behalf. I've got a master's in social policy, and I choose to get an organisation to advocate on my behalf when I do my PIP application, because we all know what PIP applications are like. Okay, I'm allowed to do a choice, and disabled people and disabled children and young people, as they come into adulthood, have that right to say, I want my mum alongside me, I want my dad, I want my friend Bob to come along, the family friend who knows about these things, to come along and either be there or prompt me or speak on my behalf. All of those options should be available. And with an organisation you're dealing with all the time, then those options should be able to be put in place on a long-running basis. And it shouldn't take something that is as much bother actually for the parents to get, and does to a certain extent take away some rights from the young person in a limited way, but has the potential to do that, when there's a really simple answer, which is that organisations need to listen when young people say, I want mum, dad, whoever to advocate on my behalf. I need their help and they need their support to do this. And that could be an informal advocate or a formal advocacy organisation.
Yeah, it's a right. You have a right to choose who supports you and when.
Yeah, and it shouldn't take a legal process.
Yeah, it all comes down to choice at the end of the day.
Yep.
The only what I agree with what you're saying, and obviously it's each case is individual and needs, and sometimes the financial side of things the young person can't manage. But I think it's also really important for people to maybe take, a takeaway from this is that we're here to support their rights. It takes a lot for young people to do, for example, Ryan today. It takes a lot of support and a lot of preparation for Ryan to come along and do this. But he can, and this is the important thing. And I agree with yourself, if organisations and all the partners that we should be working with actually listen. So if they listen to the young person's voice, hear what they're saying, and let them, if you don't need a guardianship, let in all cases, let whoever they want to support them and be by their side, let them do that. I think that's vital. So listen to the young person's voice.
Yeah, my big concern is it sounds like people are being pushed into guardianship. Good for you.
I mean, as someone who's like, I'll keep this sweet and simple. As somebody who was told by the very autistic transition course that he was in at college to go on to an administration course, but then made the choice to do 2 years of media. I understand where you're coming from, because you have a right to choose where you want to go. If you feel one unit isn't working for you, you decide what works better for you. I would continue rambling, but I think we'll only be scrambling for some food right now. So I want to say thank you all for your questions, and I'd also like to thank our panelist members for taking the time to be here and share their thoughts as well.
Thank
Thank you, Ryan. And just before we head upstairs for food and a 45-minute break, hi, I'm Laura. I'm one of the Divergent influencers. During the break, if you'd like to put any reflections on this wall, we've got coloured pens at the back. And also to direct you to the fact that we've done a photography project